end of a long, hard day, is there anything better than coming home, getting in your PJs, maybe you pour yourself like a glass of wine and watch some kind of crime mystery?
2 out of 3 are good for me. I don't wear pajamas, but
I don't want to know anymore.
I actually did this last night. There was a new one on Netflix. I watched it. And really, it's interesting. For a subject solely focused on some of the most evil acts in humanity, why does this captivate us so much?
Well, here on The 10, we dedicate 10 minutes to a single topic every weeknight. And tonight, we are talking true crime obsession.
People love it. And what we found will have you questioning more about yourself than the actual bad guys features in those mysteries. And that's our starting point tonight. Well, listen, you don't have to look far for evidence that true crime stories are wildly popular right now. Think about it. Counterclock, Crime Junkie, Dr. Death, all of those lead the bingeable podcast charts. And of course, one of the pioneers of true crime podcasts was Serial. Remember that one with Adnan? When it launched back in 2014, it became the fastest podcast to reach 5 million downloads ever.
All right, 2 years later, more than 970,000 true crime books were sold. And by 2018, that number shot up to 1.5 million.
That's a lot of reading.
It's a lot.
I don't do any of that reading. I do the podcast and the TV shows, of course. We can't forget the Netflix documentary, Making a Murderer Right. More than 19 million people watched it just in the first month alone.
Okay, even more famous than any of those books or those podcasts, NBC's Dateline. For more than 2 decades, Dateline has brought some of the most compelling mysteries to viewers. And the man at the center of it, if you don't know him by his face, you'll know his voice. None other than Keith Morrison. And we had the opportunity to talk to Keith about the true crime investigations and stories he's shared with viewers. And he says, after all these years, he still gets captivated by the stories.
The whodunit aspect of it and the effort to find out what happened, to uncover the details of it, to get to the reason of it is really at the heart of the story. It's the most fascinating kind of work I've done. Because again, it gets past all the human defenses down to what makes us the scared little creatures we are running around on this planet. Who are we? What drives us?
I love him so much. I love him so much.
I want him to read recipes. I just realized that. That'd make $1 million.
He asks some good questions, though. The who are we? What drives us? Are some of the reasons why true crime is so popular.
So for a closer look and maybe more in-depth look at the reasons behind all this, let's search for answers on our clue board. Maybe Colonel Mustard has some answers. Studies show that people are actually fascinated with evil itself. We find it intriguing to try to figure out and understand how people are evil. Are they born evil? Do they become a villain over time? What makes a person snap? All something that Keith Morrison says he understands why people want to get inside the bad guy's brain.
Access areas of human nature that you normally don't get to see. And the people we get to talk to are revealing things about themselves that normally we wouldn't understand. We wouldn't get a chance to get there.
Another main reason people are interested in true crime is because we're often driven by the adrenaline from fear. True crime books and movies and shows are like scary movies, right? In the sense that we know it's not actually happening now. It's not happening to us. It's not impacting our lives, but we can enjoy the adrenaline and the suspense as we learn more about the story.
I don't watch scary movies, but I love true crime. It also challenges us to kind of think critically, be our own detective. That's why I enjoy it. A lot of us end up playing armchair detective, try to make sense of all the clues, and ultimately see whether or not we're right, if we pick the right bad guy. If we are, we get that satisfaction of figuring out the mystery.
These are people who wind up in getting under your skin, and so you want to know what happens to them.
Colonel Mustard with the lead pipe, right? Usually. All right. And it helps us feel prepared. Our minds like to think about the what-if scenarios, and we often look to true crime stories as examples of what to do or what not to do in case we were ever found, God forbid, to be in one of these situations. The idea of preparedness has been front of mind for Dr. Amanda Vickery. She's a social psychologist and professor at Illinois Wesleyan University. She has 6 years of experience studying the psychology behind crime and is, by the way, a self-professed true crime addict herself, so we bond on that one. In 2010, she published a study in the journal Social, Psychological, and Personality Science in which she looked at statistics behind true crime stories and found that women are much more likely to be drawn to stories on true crime, and it's for a few different reasons.
So I found that women, both men and women, but women especially, liked when a true crime story had something that involved the psychological content of the killer. What set him off? What made him kill? What was in his background? Basically, what are some red flags maybe that you could look for? And I also found that women liked learning about like defense techniques, like tricks maybe that people use to escape from a crime.
And it works in real life. Earlier this year, a little girl in Florida actually survived an attempted kidnapping and even helped police track down the suspect, all because of a trick she learned while watching Law & Order SVU. Ripped from the headlines, you know what I'm talking about. Take a look at this video here. This actually shows that 11-year-old girl, Alyssa, waiting at a bus stop when a white SUV pulls up. The man gets out, grabs her. You see them struggle there. She kicks, she screams, and she is able to break free. While that knife-wielding suspect had her in a headlock, she remembered a tip from that show. Try to leave a little bit of evidence on him. She happened to be playing with blue slime at the time, and she smeared it on that man, and it worked. A couple days later, police tracked down that van the man was in, and the suspect, get this, still had that blue dye marks on his arms from that slime, and you likely know, JC, that slime actually not easy to clean up.
No, it sticks to everything. It's banned in my household, but in this case, brilliant move. Boston area author Casey Sherman has studied a lot of crime stories. Casey's aunt was one of the last victims of the so-called Boston Strangler. He never met his aunt, but he felt her absence every day growing up and decided to reinvestigate the notorious Strangler case. Sherman says the most important thing to remember is that every story represents a family that has been torn apart by loss and grief.
Making sure that these victims aren't just names or statistics, that these are people that lost their lives, that created huge holes in their own families. I know this because I've been through it myself. So I always want to make sure that, the fascination around true crime comes at cost, a very painful cost for the families of those they left behind.
Yeah, paying tribute to the families is so important, especially because, when we're telling these true crime stories, right, oftentimes they sensationalize the killer, and that's the name you think of.
Yeah, and you don't want to walk away thinking, oh, this person was cool or it's an interesting fake story. These are real people. Take Ted Bundy, for example. He was one of the most cold-blooded killers in this country's history. He's confessed to 30 murders. It's likely even more than that. And for the recent anniversary, marking 30 years since his execution, Netflix came out with a documentary series. The Netflix series was called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile. And it starred the ever-so-hunky Zac Efron, who played Bundy. And Bundy himself was often referred to as a charming, attractive man as well.
When you have an attractive actor like, Zac Efron exuding charm in his portrayal of somebody like Ted Bundy, who exuded charm himself in his real life, there is this, I would say, blurring of vision here. In terms of what is Hollywood fascination and what is real life.
Yeah, and it's a thin line. You don't want to make the serial killer likable. In her research, Dr. Vickery has found that both pros and cons when it comes to indulging in true crime. Well, listen, true crime. Now, a lot of people watch it as a way to relax and unwind. We mentioned the PJs and the wine, right? Dr. Vickery says depending on how much someone consumes it, it also could be increasing your anxiety.
If all day long we are exposing ourselves to stories of this happening to people, we start to think that every person around the corner is a serial killer. And so if it gets to the point where people are scared to leave their homes, they're scared to have someone approach them in a grocery store, then of course this can be a con, that the anxiety, the fear has gotten so extreme.
Okay, so that's when it's time to turn it off and go to something else. We already talked about how true crime stories have helped people learn tips for survival, blue slime, but true crime investigations can also help solve cold cases. And one of the notable ones happened right here in New England. Authorities in New Hampshire were finally able to identify a woman and 3 young girls whose bodies were found in barrels in Bear Brook State Park. It was a listener of New Hampshire Public Radio's true crime podcast, Bear Brook, who used Ancestry.com to help police connect the dots. Sometimes podcasts not only help solve cold cases, they can help bring new evidence into the spotlight and clear the wrongfully convicted. True crime stories are famous for their twists and their turns.
What makes them fun, right?
So for
someone like Keith Morrison, right? He's seen it all these different stories, but all about murder and evil too. We just had to ask him. We had to know, does anything surprise him anymore?
I'm surprised when we encounter a character who is shamelessly devious. That kind of personality is one that I still don't understand, but I must say is darkly fascinating.
And he sat across from these people. He
Yeah.
has sat and looked eye to eye with people who are the devious.
Yeah. And you wonder, too, because as you
Multi-murderers.
watch them, too, you always have who you think is the suspect, and then it changes, and obviously that's part of the drama,
Well, that's
the making
where-
of these podcasts and
That's
these shows.
where we play FBI.
Yes.
You know, we get to figure out who done it.
And I never get it right, but it's still fun to watch anyway. All right, coming up here on the 10, a lot more still ahead, including some new concern over the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the risk of nerve complications that now has the FDA investigating.
Police looking for a man who they say was caught on camera entering a home while the family was there. What happened next? You'll want to hear that. And of course, Pete with our weather.
That's right, JC. We're talking about the sunshine returning to parts of northern New England and how we may get some sun and a break in this pattern later this week. That's coming up.